Hey y'all, welcome back. So for today's video, I'm going to be looking at and reacting to your controversial doll opinions. This got started because I had an opinion or two of my own that was a little bit controversial that I wanted to share, and I thought it would be more fun to do so in a video where I'm also taking a look at y'all's opinions, and so I asked on Instagram and then here on YouTube for you guys to submit opinions for me to react to, and y'all did not hold back. Thank you so much to everyone who responded. I will say I got unbelievable amounts of responses, which was awesome, but it does mean that I could not fit all of them in this video. So if I don't end up reacting to your opinion, I promise you it's not anything personal. It doesn't mean that I disagree with your opinion or I do agree with your opinion, because we will be looking at opinions that I do agree and also disagree with here. So like, it doesn't reflect on how I felt about your comment. It just means that I literally didn't have the time in this video to do all of them. So I'm very sorry if I missed yours. I probably will end up doing this again in the future because you guys did end up giving me a lot of opinions to look at. So keep it in the back of your mind, and we could always do another video, because I did already do one where it was unpopular doll opinions, and a lot of the responses I got for this video were different than I got in that one. So I feel like we could make it not necessarily a series, because I wouldn't be doing it that regularly, but every once in a while we can check in and talk about some unpopular or controversial opinions. But yeah, big disclaimer here is that I'm obviously going to be giving my opinions, and you guys already gave me yours. So if you disagree, that's fine. Just please be civil in the comments. Most of the time I don't really give that intense a warning, I guess you would say, but these are more controversial opinions, and so I don't want there to be like any fighting or anything like that. Like, you guys are absolutely allowed to have respectful discussions and to disagree, but just let's try to keep it as nice as possible in the comments there. And then I did also delete the post where I asked for the opinions and everything, and then the other one was on Instagram stories, so like that's been deleted, and those were all private to me anyway. So that way I won't be sharing anyone's usernames of who gave these opinions, so like no one will be coming at you. I won't be sharing screenshots or anything, because I don't want anyone to disagree with an opinion and then end up looking for the person who gave that opinion, because that's not strife that I want to be causing today. So the one thing with that is that since I can't flash up images here, this video might be like a little bit less visually interesting, and I'm sorry for that, but it's definitely more important to me to like protect y'all's peace than it is to create a video that's like, wow, the visuals are so fun, you know? But yes, if you guys do enjoy the video as we go through, if you could give it a like, that's very helpful to me. And then if you're new here and you enjoy your time, definitely subscribe so you can see more. And if you want to go just absolutely out of your way to support me, I do have my other social medias and then my Amazon wishlist and my P.O. box in the description down below. I'm a little bit nervous today just because, like I said, these are controversial and some of them are pretty intense, and I do have pretty strong opinions, but we are going to be going ahead and getting right into them. I will be giving my opinions at the end of the video, the ones that like started this whole thing, so definitely stick around for that. But let's just get started. Alrighty, the first one is several things. I don't mind that Monster High dolls don't come with stands, I don't mind poly hair, and I don't care if a doll is articulated or not. This one is definitely a more tame opinion compared to some of the ones that I got here. I do kind of agree in the sense that I think there are exceptions to every rule for me. I think that if I like a doll's design enough, personally, the hair is not like my #1 thing, so it doesn't really matter to me if the hair is poly, if the design is nice enough. Like, if I think it's an ugly doll and it also has poly hair, that's 2 reasons for me to not buy it. But I can like dolls with poly hair. I always appreciate stands. It is what it is. Like, some dolls come with them, some don't. So like, again, if I like a doll enough, I will absolutely buy that doll regardless of whether they have a stand or not. The articulation is probably the one that gets me the most. I really prefer articulation. But again, if I like a doll enough, I can overlook that. It just has like a very high bar to clear. So I do think this is fair. I feel like everyone has their own preferences on what's important to them in a doll. And some people don't care about articulation. Some people really care about hair. Everyone just likes different things, and yeah, for me, there's exceptions to all of the rules. The next one is hating a doll relentlessly and without actual constructive criticism isn't cute, it's childish. I do think that there is a line here, because I don't think you always have to have a reason to dislike a doll. There are tons of dolls that I don't enjoy just because I don't really vibe with them, and there's nothing wrong with them. It's not like I can say, wow, this was really poorly designed. I just don't like it. So I definitely think people are allowed to dislike or even hate a doll for no reason and without having constructive criticism. That being said, I don't think that there is a reason to be super mean about it. Like, I can dislike a doll. I'm trying to think of one off the top of my head, and I'm staring at all of my dolls and I'm like, I love all of these. So I'm trying to think of a doll that I don't like. Like, I don't love the Skulltimate Secrets, Neon Frights, Frankie. I don't think they're terrible. I just am not obsessed with them. And that's what I say in videos when I talk about them, or if I like post on Instagram about them. So I do think that you don't have to have a reason to hate or dislike a doll, but you don't necessarily need to like relentlessly, like the commenter said, go in on them and use really foul language or anything like that. So I do think there's a line there. I don't think there has to be a reason to dislike something. But just in general, in all of life, I think that there's, you know, a level of criticism that is appropriate, even if it's without reason, and a level of criticism that is, like, really harsh and almost violent verbally, you know? So I kind of agree and disagree on that one. The next one is people hate for no reason on new doll drops because then they whine about not getting them. I do kind of agree with this one, and this is getting a little bit more controversial. I do think that there is some wiggle room in the sense that sometimes opinions change, and sometimes people do need to see a doll in person before they really can connect with it. That has definitely happened to me on several occasions. My number one example, like off the top of my head, is Natasha Zima. I had no intention whatsoever of buying her, but I found her on a good clearance sale, so I bought her for her clothing, and then I ended up loving the actual doll. So people can change their minds, and so I don't want to immediately jump to criticism when it comes to people who might appear to be changing their minds. That being said, there are definitely people who like will criticize a drop or a release or a design and buy it anyway and then kind of switch up. I know when Monster High Gen 3 was first announced, a lot of people were very, very violently hating on it when we got leaks for the Cleo doll. That was the first doll that we got leaks for. And that very quickly changed. And again, there's definitely some people out there who genuinely just changed their opinion. And so I'm not trying to like come for anyone for changing your opinion. I've done it. I do it all the time. You're absolutely allowed to feel differently than you did several months ago. But yes, there are some people who will change their opinion with the tide of what is popular, and especially maybe in the influencer sphere that might happen. I'm not calling anyone out. This isn't like, I don't know what the video version of a subtweet is, but I'm not thinking of anyone in particular. I'm just saying, yes, sometimes this does happen, so I can't really disagree with this one entirely. Okay, then we have, I think we often have to remember that the target audience for Playline dolls is children, and some stands are a little bit too harsh on the dolls and the show. I get this in some capacity, but also I don't, because here's the thing, it's like I understand that things are designed for children when it comes to toys primarily. Like I understand that there are a lot of adult collectors who enjoy Playline dolls, but they are primarily designed for children, and that is fine. I do think that comes into play more with like safety potentially. So I understand if dolls don't have as many like moving parts that might be fragile and breakable and could result in a kid choking on them, or even just if they're being played with very harshly, maybe you don't want to have pieces that are prone to breakage because they're very fragile because they're meant to be played with. But I also don't think that a doll being designed for children is an excuse to not put your utmost into the design, because it's not like kids don't also deserve nice things. Like just because something is for a kid doesn't mean that you can't like put your all into it and you can't want to make something really nice for that kid. And also, even though Playline dolls are primarily designed for children, the adult collector market is very large. Like larger than I feel like most people recognize, and so I feel like companies do have that in the back of their mind as well. Obviously not necessarily the absolute target audience, but they know that there are a lot of adult collectors and they definitely want to appeal to them as well. With the shows, I think there's even less room for that critique because children's media can be really, really good. Like good enough to enjoy into adulthood, and I do think that with shows especially, sometimes they are just not very well written, or there's not like a lot of budget put into the writing team, I will say, because like I don't always think that it's the writer's fault. Sometimes it's just someone higher up is deciding, hey, yeah, this is the level of effort that we are willing to put into this, this is the level of like care that we're willing to put into this. But just because media is designed for children does not mean that it has to be bad. It can be really good, and I don't think that creating a show for children means that it has to be a lesser quality show. Like I think of when I was younger, Avatar: The Last Airbender is still an amazing show that was technically designed for kids, not like necessarily super young kids, but for kids. And now I haven't seen Bluey, but I hear a lot about Bluey, which is designed for children, but a lot of adults also love it and it has a lot of important messages. So I do think it's fair to criticize doll shows just because like you know, even kids watching them can benefit from good writing. Then we have, I don't know if this counts as opinion, but dolls not going to other countries is BS. That I wholeheartedly agree with. When it comes to like mass marketed dolls, I understand if there are very, very small doll companies or independent doll developers, if they can only ship within their country, that makes sense to me. But when it comes to like Mattel and MGA, there really is no reason that they should be ignoring their international audiences or making it so difficult for their international audiences with the amount of markup that they have on the prices. To me, there's really no excuse for that, so I absolutely agree with this one. Okay, then we have adult collectors have absolutely no right to complain about Playline dolls' design or quality. The dolls aren't made for you. Nobody cares if you think their outfit isn't CUNTY enough. We'll be getting to that word in a second because I actually got another comment about this and I'll like talk about it then. But like I said, children's media and children's dolls don't have to be that bad. Like obviously they're mass marketed, they are Playline, so they might be lower quality than like collector dolls, but they don't have to be bad just because they are for children. And again, there is a very large adult collector audience that isn't buying specifically collector dolls, but is buying Playline dolls. So I absolutely think it's fair for adult collectors to criticize them. I mean, I do it all the time, so like obviously I think it's fair, but I think it's perfectly reasonable to criticize them. Like I said, the CUNTY, that I kind of agree with. Like, I don't necessarily think that you should look at a, like, rainbow high doll and that's, like, the first word that comes to mind. We'll get there in a moment. But in general, yeah, adult collectors can complain about Playline dolls. I'm sorry to the person who said this. I'm not trying to be mean to anyone, like, when I respond. But yeah, we can complain. The doll community on Twitter has always had issues, but now it's generally much more hostile towards different opinions for some reason, which sucks because there are such a large active community on there. Yeah, I don't mess with Twitter. I've never messed with Twitter because it's always been a social media site that, like, frankly scared me. I just feel like people are extra unhinged on Twitter, and that's definitely true for the doll community. Like I said, I don't go on Twitter. I technically have one for a doll account, but I don't use it. I have had interactions unwillingly on Twitter before that were not super fun. There are just certain online spaces where people are meaner in general, and obviously that applies to the doll community as well. Sometimes people are just going to be a little bit more aggressive or a little bit less filtered, and yeah, I'm not a huge fan of Twitter. It is so sad how easy the community is pulled into obsessive purchasing, both resale and retail. I see posts where people cannot stop going doll hunting and it makes me sad, honestly. I do kind of understand this. I do think it's the nature of a, like, hobby that is rooted in consumerism for this to be more of a risk than other hobbies. Like, a lot of doll collecting, since it's collecting, is buying new dolls, again, whether that's retail or resale. That is a big part of the hobby, and so I think it's more natural for people to fall into this if they're not aware of it. I talk very frequently about how the amount of releases like stresses me out, or I get FOMO and that sort of thing. Like, I try to be very open about that, and I do think that some of that is tied into this like overconsumption thing, and I do know it's a problem, and like I try to combat it personally. I think when it comes to talking about other people who are going doll hunting all the time, I don't want to speak on their like situations because I'm not in their shoes. I don't know their finances and I don't know their mental health. If they have the money to do that without jeopardizing their needs and like their essentials in life, like, who am I to judge them, you know? Or if they are able to go doll hunting all the time and constantly be looking for new dolls to buy and constantly buying new dolls without that becoming something that's straining their mental health, again, I'm not really here to judge, but that being said, I do think that it is very easy to accidentally fall into a cycle where that collecting aspect becomes financially straining or it does become mentally taxing, and I think that as collectors it's really good to be aware that that's something that we could fall into quite easily so that we can try to protect ourselves from that. That's not saying that if anyone is in a position where they have spent more than they should on a doll or they are feeling stressed out about dolls is bad. Like, I'm not judging you at all for that, because again, it's something that I've struggled with, at least when it comes to the mental health. Thankfully, I've been pretty good about finances, but it's not like for me to judge you, and it's something that could happen to any one of us. But I do think it's important to like kind of keep that in the back of your mind and try to be careful and try to take care of yourself, because it is just a hobby that I feel it can become toxic is the wrong word. That's not quite what I want, but it's a hobby that can turn sour if you aren't careful. I'm talking so much on each of these. Like, I already cut down the number that I was going to do. This is going to be such a long video. I'm so sorry. Anyway, as a goth, Monster High was never goth. The people who say that in reference to G1 Monster High do not understand what goth is. Yeah, you're not wrong. Like, I think I got this comment a few times, actually. At least as far as, like, trad goth goes, because that's the most easily recognizable goth to me. No, Monster High definitely was not goth. There are a lot of goth subcultures that I'm less familiar with, so, like, they could have been inspired by some of those subcultures, but definitely they were never that far. Like, they were very alternative in terms of comparing it to like Barbie or whatever else was on the shelves, but Monster High definitely was never like that deep into a subculture, if you know what I mean. Like they were never B-goth, that's the line that I'm thinking of. B-goth dolls are dolls that are directly inspired by different goth subcultures. Monster High was absolutely never at that level. Next up we have, I've come around to the newer G3 lines. However, while every other character seems to be improving in style, one character I always have an issue with is Claudine. They keep putting her in ugly outfits. It angers me so much. She's the main character, yet never gets good outfits. I don't know, G1 Claudine over G3 any day for me, but the rest are still good. This is kind of a matter of opinion. Like, I understand that the G3 Claudine is pretty different from her G1 counterpart, and so some people aren't going to like that. I like her in G3. I like the glasses. I like these sort of like 80s inspired outfits. I think they're fun. I'm obsessed with her Monster Ball doll, especially since I gave her braids. She is so pretty. So personally, I disagree. I don't know. I think that people kind of overhate on G3 Claudine because I think she's very different from G1 Claudine, but that doesn't necessarily make her bad. The G3 Monster High hasn't been good and won't be good unless they revert back to G1. I'm sorry, I just disagree. I don't want to say you're wrong because I think that that's unfair of me because everyone is allowed to have their own opinion. But I violently disagree. I just think there are some things that were great about Gen 1, some things that I loved. I think that they had a lot of beautiful designs. Look behind me on the shelves. Very clearly, I was a fan. I don't think that that means absolutely nothing that G3 has done has been good. Like, I just think that that is not a correct statement. I know I just said I don't want to call you wrong. You're allowed to dislike G3. I just feel like a lot of that is not coming from a place of looking at the dolls and designs and show and stuff objectively. Like, with Monster High Gen 1, there were no canonically explicitly queer characters. Yes, Valentine was like supposed to be coded to be gay, but it wasn't stated that he was, you know, like that's kind of an after effect. In G3, we have Frankie, who is canonically non-binary, who is flirting with Cleo, which would make it a sapphic relationship. That's good. Like, that is objectively something that G3 has that Gen 1 doesn't have, and it's more representation, which is a good thing. So I understand if you even hate most things about G3, but I think saying that absolutely nothing in Gen 3 is good is just oversimplifying things a lot. I'm gonna lose subscribers. Y'all are gonna be like, I'm out after this video. Okay. Many large doll YouTubers, not all, make jokes about irresponsible spending, having box doll backlogs, dolls spreading into all areas of their house, and struggling extreme emotions letting things go. These jokes aren't funny and likely are a true hoarding disorder. I'm not saying one or two jokes, but the common theme of checking all the categories. Again, I don't think it's necessarily my place to speculate on the mental health of anyone else, but like other doll YouTubers in this case, just because I don't know their life. The irresponsible spending might be like the most concerning one, just because, you know, you need to be careful and like you need to be taking care of things that like are rent or utilities or your food before you buy dolls. Just in general, that's not like dolls specifically, but in any hobby, like you gotta take care of yourself and like your health, your mental health and all that jazz as best as you can. But having box doll backlogs, I have that currently, not because it's anything crazy, but just because I have purchased dolls and I haven't gotten around to filming them. And I don't know, I don't really see that as an issue. Maybe I'm too close to it. I'm not like a big doll YouTuber, but I'm a doll YouTuber. So maybe I'm too close to the issue. But looking at my situation at least, I don't think that it's like because I've bought so many dolls and I've like overconsumed to such an extent, like I just haven't gotten around to it. Again, everyone could be different, so it could be a problem for other people, but for me, looking at it, it's like that could also be very normal. Dolls spreading into all areas of their house. If you want to keep your dolls in one specific area of your house, that is dandy. I don't really care. I only have a couple of dolls that aren't displayed in the doll room, but they're like my custom dolls for the most part. I have a couple of others, but for the most part, they're my custom dolls, and they're in the living room because to me, they're also pieces of art that I've created. But even if you don't have ones that you've made, like, you can just like a doll and think it goes with your decor, or you can just have a lot of dolls that you want to display all over your house. So again, like, it could be something where it becomes, I have too many dolls, I don't know where to put them, they are spreading everywhere, and I'm unhealthy about this. Or it could just be that you really, really, really love dolls and they're in every room and you're happy every room you walk into, you know? I'm not also, like, attacking the commenter here, I'm just passionate. I'm so sorry. And then, like, struggling with extreme emotions, letting things go. I do understand that, because it's like, you spent your money on this, it's hard to let it go, or especially if someone buys something for you, or you bought it for a special occasion, or it's a collector doll, it's limited edition. I think it's normal to have some degree of emotion when letting things go. Basically, my whole response to this is that all of these things are things that could be a problem, and if you see them all in conjunction, maybe they could be, but I don't know anyone's life outside of what they post on the internet, you know? Like, I'm not in their house or in their life, so I don't want to speculate and be like, oh, this person has a problem, because that's not necessarily fair of me to do. I hope that makes sense and doesn't come across as harsh. I started off this video so cold, and now I'm so warm under the lights, but I have to keep going. Anyway, I think it's extremely immature and childish when a collector continuously talks about how ugly a new doll is, and that anyone who thinks otherwise is just a brand loyalist. Also, judging a doll based on a blurry leak isn't a great way of forming an opinion. I feel like a lot of fans forget that designers are online as well and seeing their comments. It's fine to call out when a company is being shaded or constructively critique something you don't like. However, comments like, OMG, huge miss, who approved this, what were the designers thinking, is so needlessly rude. You're tearing down someone's hard work for no reason other than to seem cute and edgy. This is another hard one because I do think there's, like, a fine line here. I think people are allowed to criticize things, you know? Like, people are allowed to think the doll is ugly. I mentioned, I think in one of the first things we talked about in this video, that I do think there's a difference between saying, yeah, I don't like this, even if I don't have constructive criticism, just being like, yeah, this one isn't for me, and being really rude about it. So I get what you're coming from in that sense, but I actually see this a lot about the idea that the designers are online too, and they can hear what you're saying, and so you shouldn't be so critical of their dolls. And again, I don't think you should be rude. I don't think that you should be calling out names and being like, this designer sucks, or this is terrible, because the thing is that everyone has different opinions. So, like, for every doll that I hate, that is someone's favorite doll, you know, just because we're different people. So I don't think that you need to be rude about it. But also, just because the designers are also online doesn't mean that you can't critique a doll. I don't mean for that to sound harsh, but I see this in, like, art communities too, where people will post their art, especially on TikTok, publicly, and then get mad when people comment saying something about it. And again, I understand if it's super rude, but, like, if I don't want my paintings to be critiqued, I don't post them anywhere. And I don't, because typically I'm really anxious about my art. Every once in a while I will post something because I might feel good about it, or I might feel comfortable with the idea that people might see it and critique it. But the things that I'm less comfortable with being critiqued, or the art that I'm less, like, confident in, I don't post online, because once it's on the internet, anyone can say anything, and I would hope that no one would be rude, and I hope that whenever I critique dolls, I'm able to come across in a genuine way, or if I just flat out don't like it, I'm able to say that in a nice way and acknowledge that that's just my opinion, because that's what I try to do. Probably don't get it right every time. I'm sure I mess up because I'm a person, but I don't think that just because the designers are online and can read comments of people saying, hey, I don't like this, is a reason to not say that, because I think that being in the public sphere in that sense, where you're creating art that is going to be created and mass marketed for people to consume, there are going to be people who don't like it. And yeah, you shouldn't be mean to the designers. You shouldn't be, like, rude or vulgar or anything like that, because they can see that and that's hurtful. But I don't think that we can just say, hey, we can't critique this because someone could see it. I hope that makes sense. I feel like I'm talking in circles, but I hope that you get what I'm saying. Like, designers are going to be criticized, whether it is from the people consuming their stuff or from the people who have hired them. They're going to get critique, and as long as it is friendly critique, or it's just not, like, super intensely mean, I think it's okay to say you don't like something and for that designer to see it. Okay, I really dislike people who are G1 Monster High fans who constantly shame others for liking G3. I collect and love both, but every time I try to bring up how I love G3, a lot of people won't stop shaming me for liking it. It's really frustrating. 100%. I got so many comments like this, and I think it's ridiculous. Like, I said earlier, you're allowed to not like it. Like, you can be someone who prefers Gen 1 of Monster High, but to broadly hate G3 and to shame people for enjoying G3, I think is wrong. Okay, I'm really tired of people over-sexualizing dolls. I've seen posts on Reddit of Monster High dolls having a thong out and micro mini skirts. It's gross. Also, I hate how everyone is using the term cunt to describe dolls. I honestly haven't come across the, like, over-sexualized posts, thankfully. That's just not something that I have come across, really. It's hard for me to say, because on the one hand, like, it is your doll. You can dress her however you want. So, like, I don't want to be judgmental in that case, but I do think that in certain situations it might make me feel a little bit weird. But this is, I mentioned this earlier, that cunt was going to come up. I'm going to use the term cloud as like the censorship here, because it's going to be really hard to just spell out this word every time I want to say it and like talk about it. But also, I don't want to use that word that many times. So we're going to say cloud, but it will mean cunt, okay? Since we're all on the same page. This is a complicated one. I got to put my phone down because I have very strong opinions about this, actually. This is hard to like get started on because it's a much broader issue than just dolls to me. Short version, I also don't like when people use this term to describe dolls. Here's the thing, is that in some other parts of the world, I know that that is a very, like, normal word to use. Like, you'll just call your friends clouds, and that's very normal. So, like, that's fine. Within America, cloud has historically, at least within recent history, been an insult. Like, it's not a good thing to be called. And yet now, being called cloudy or serving cloud is a good thing. And I think what bothers me about this, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that that terminology, serving cloud or cloudy, is something that has been popularized by gay men or drag queens. And that just frankly bothers me because, again, in recent history, the term cloud has been a derogatory term towards women. And so I feel like it's kind of like any other slur, honestly. I know that some people might disagree that it is a slur, but I know that it has been used in very violent situations. You know, like there are, I'm saying women, but it absolutely could be like any AFAB person who have had like a breakup and their ex-boyfriend texts them and says that they are a worthless cloud, or they might get assaulted, God forbid, and they're called a cloud during that assault. Or even just if you reject a man at a bar, he might call you a cloud. Like, it's not a good thing to be called that, or at least it hasn't been historically. And it's been something that has been said primarily by men towards primarily women or AFAB peoples as an insult and as a term of degradation and as a way to put them down. Is it right that that has been how it's used? No, because I don't think that's fair. But that is how it's been used historically. And so to me, it is kind of like, I'm not necessarily trying to compare severity because I don't think that that's fair at all. But the easiest example for me is to compare it, again, within American society, to the N-word. I would never say the N-word because you can see my skin. I'm very pale. I'm a Caucasian. I'm a white person. So, like, it would be inappropriate for me to say that. Black people have reclaimed the N-word because it used to be said as an insult and sometimes still is said as an insult towards them. And so they've taken the term and given it their own meaning as a way of reclaiming that word. So if AFAB peoples and women have reclaimed the term cloud as a way to empower themselves over this insult that has been thrown at them and this violent word that has been thrown at them, I think that that's a good thing. And I know that there are women and AFAB people who are using that term now, but again, I could be wrong, so correct me if I am, but I believe it's been popularized by other men. Gay men, yes. Drag queens, yes. Like, I understand that it's not necessarily the same people, but it does just sit badly with me that this word is constantly something whose definition is being dictated by people who are, like, ultimately less affected by it. I guess that's the best way to put it. This is a very controversial take. I'm so sorry. But it bothers me because it doesn't feel like the appropriate way to reclaim the word, because I don't feel like it has mostly been reclaimed by the people who have been affected by it, if that makes sense. And also, it can still be a bad thing. And I think that's really frustrating to me that it has been decided by people who, again, primarily are unaffected by the use of this term, that it's still a bad thing to be called a cloud, but it's great if you're serving cloud or if your outfit is cloudy. You know what I'm saying? It just doesn't feel, I'm saying women because it's just like the easiest term that I have. It doesn't feel like women have any say in the use of this word, even though they are the ones who are most affected by it, and it really does bother me. So in general, that term, I hate hearing people use it. So when it comes to dolls, I also hate it. That was a very long-winded answer and extremely unnecessary, but that one evoked a lot of emotion in me, so here I am. Anyway, next up. My opinion is that the G3 Monster High dolls are way better than the old ones. I could never connect to the designs of G1 dolls even as an alt person, and also the extremely skinny bodies just held them back for me. I love the diversity and character the G3 dolls have. I got this one so much for different reasons, but I got so many people saying that they like G3 better than G1. I said earlier, I love G1. You can see behind me that I love Monster High. I always have loved Monster High. I've mostly liked every generation. Gen 2 was rough for me, but Gen 1 and Gen 3 both are so special to me. That being said, I do think I like G3 better. I think I agree with this. My husband agrees with this, if that means anything too. I just think that it's really cool, and maybe that's just because I'm an adult now, and so like I've got more processing power in my brain, and so I'm enjoying them in a different way. But I do kind of agree, so... This one made me laugh, I don't know why. I think Bratz dolls are overrated and hideous. Sorry to those who love them. Yeah, people have different opinions. My husband agrees with this one as well. He really, really does not like Bratz dolls, and like, it's comical to me because I collect some of them. But yeah, people just like different things, so sure. I don't personally feel that way about Bratz, but sure. This isn't necessarily a hot take, but I feel the doll community doesn't shine enough light on BJDs. They're so beautiful, unique, and known for being highly customizable. Yes, they are quite expensive, but that's for good reason. So this is hard because I know that there are probably tons of you out there who are very, very, very nice people who are also BJD fans. And I like BJDs in the sense that I think they're beautiful and I would love to own one someday. But I think there are two reasons why the BJD community and the doll community don't have like a wider overlap. I think number one is, like this commenter said, the price. They are pricier to get into, and oftentimes they do have like an artistic element to get into. Not always. Like, you can absolutely buy a BJD that has like already gotten a face up and has clothes made, or you can commission people to do those things for you. But a lot of people will want to paint their own faces, so there is also that. But the big thing I think is honestly the community. Again, not trying to generalize and say every BJD fan is terrible, but some of them can be quite rude. I think the biggest thing is like when it comes to recasts, which are basically knockoff fake BJDs, some people will get them as gifts from other people who didn't know, or they just bought and thought that it was a legit doll and they accidentally got a recast and didn't know. And people will treat them so terribly for owning this doll. And I understand that like there's a reason to be anti-recast because they are knockoffs often of small businesses, and so therefore they are sometimes directly taking money out of the pockets of small businesses and small artists. So I understand that mindset. Like, I understand not supporting recast, but also on the internet, I think it can be so hard for people who are getting into the hobby or who are new to this to accidentally end up with a recast or not realize that a recast is bad until it's too late, or again, to get one as a gift. And then they end up being shunned from BJD spaces. They're not allowed to post pictures. They are like not allowed to enjoy this doll publicly. And I understand that it's hard because like you don't necessarily want to be promoting that. But at the same time, not everyone who buys a recast does so knowingly. And I think that the BJD community can just be really, really, really harsh on people, and so I think that makes people not want to get into them as much. The Barbie movie dolls all look cheap and rushed and unceremoniously stuffed in their box, and not at all worth the price they were sold for. I definitely don't think that they all look that bad, but I do agree that the price was too high on all of them. Okay, this is another hot take. I'm sorry in advance to the commenter who left this. Anything that I say, I'm not trying to be mean, but I do have a very strong opinion on this one. My opinion. Dolls don't need realistic proportions. It's a toy. Dolls don't cause body dysmorphia. People do with their comments. And G3 Monster High stands are toxic. You don't like something, they gang up on you. G1 and G3 stands is like going to World War. Let's address this one piece at a time here. So as far as the proportions not needing to be realistic, doll proportions generally aren't realistic. A lot of dolls have very large heads. But as far as like the body dysmorphia aspect, I will agree that dolls in and of themselves don't cause body dysmorphia, but dolls are a product of a society that does cause body dysmorphia for a lot of people, and I think it's violently inaccurate to say that dolls don't have an effect on that. I think I just said it was always good for there to be more diversity, and I think that absolutely applies to dolls. This person is specifically talking about body type, but in everything. Black people for ages have been saying that having dolls with more variety of skin tones makes them feel better and feel more seen, instead of every doll being super pale. And dolls that have like different hair types can make more people feel seen, or things like vitiligo or freckles can make people feel more seen. I have to wear glasses because I have horrid eyesight, and I feel so excited every time I see a doll who looks so cute and also has glasses, because that's not something that you always see, and it makes me feel so happy. There are tons of people who have said that they love Gen 3 Draculaura specifically because she is a little bit curvier and is closer to or identical to their body type, and it makes them feel like they're beautiful as well. I don't think that dolls by themselves cause body dysmorphia, but if you are trying to claim that representation doesn't matter whatsoever, or different body types don't matter whatsoever, you're flat out just incorrect. Again, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be rude to the person who left this comment, but there are tons of people on all sorts of social media saying that it does matter and that they feel more seen when there's a tall doll, or a thicker doll, or a doll with glasses, or a doll with a prosthetic leg, or who uses a wheelchair. It matters. Like, it does. And if you don't believe that, I think that there's a deeper issue. I'm sorry. I know that that sounds really mean, but like, when there are actively people telling you that it does matter and you refuse to believe them, I don't know what to think. Also, yeah, G1 and G3 stands. It does feel a bit like going to war, but saying G3 stands is toxic, I disagree. Yes, I'm a G3 fan, so like, I am biased. I'm also a G1 fan though, and I'm not saying that there have been no G3 fans who have been toxic and mean and unnecessarily rude towards G1 fans, but across the board, G1 fans have been so much worse. I'm sorry. Again, I know there have been terrible G3 fans as well, and I know that there are perfectly wonderful G1 fans. Like, I'm not saying that every single person who fits into one of these camps is that way, but if you look at the percentages, if there was like some way to calculate a pie chart of this, I promise you more G1 people have been mean. Like, the amount of G1 fans who hated Draculaura because she got slightly curvier is crazy to me. And like, the amount of people who will say that G3 is bad no matter what, and is awful no matter what, and there's nothing they can do to be good, and G1 will always be superior. You can like that. More G1 fans are toxic than G3, and I will stand by that, and I feel like that might be a controversial thing to say. And again, I'm not trying to be mean to the original commenter. I just objectively don't think that's true, and I feel really strongly about that.
Hello, editing me here. I didn't decide to stop giving hot takes while editing, apparently, because I wanted to add on to that one. I also think that a lot of G3 fans who get more heated, even like myself in this video, are doing it in response to hatred from Gen 1 fans. Like, I do think, I understand again that I'm biased, but I really do think that the toxicity started by Gen 1 people, or like G1 fans, deciding that G3 was bad no matter what, and then if you liked G3 you were stupid and terrible. And so I do think that while again there is definitely some toxicity on the G3 side, there is a lot of it that is in response to G1 stans deciding to start a fight over dolls.
This one is a controversial take. So I'm glad that this is anonymous, because I have gotten rude comments over this before, because I kind of agree. I hate Ghoulia Yelps. I think she is super ugly, overrated, and unappealing in G1 and in G3. I wouldn't go so far as to say that I hate her, because I think a lot of my issue with her is that I don't like zombies in general, and I can't detach zombie from Ghoulia, but I don't like Ghoulia. I didn't like her in Gen 1, I don't like her in G3. That's just how it is, and I have gotten, mostly on TikTok, very upset comments when I say that. I just don't like her, so I do agree a little bit with this person. Okay, people who buy extra Mattel Creation dolls to trade for others are as bad as scalpers, because they're making the market even smaller and harder to get into for people who don't have the money to hoard collector dolls for trading purposes. I do disagree with this one. I think that the fault is with Mattel. You know, I think that they could be doing more to make it harder for bots to get dolls. They could be doing more to do whatever they can to prevent scalping. And I think that the reason people buy extra dolls for trading is because it is so hard to get these dolls. And so I feel like people wouldn't be doing that if Mattel was doing their job and making the dolls more accessible, whether that is preventing bots better or whether that is making a higher quantity so that more actual fans can get them, so that scalpers are less inclined to try to get them. I understand the frustration, but I do think that at that point it is Mattel's fault, and it's the way that they're going about the releases, and it's their fault, because I think people who are trading are just saying, okay, well, if I miss 1 out of every 3 drops because of the Mattel Creations website, on the one that I can get, I want to get 2 dolls so that I can hopefully trade one for one of the releases that I missed. And I think that's a reasonable thing to do, especially because there are, for people who aren't using bots to get around it, there are limits. Like, usually it's you can only get 2, and so it's not like actual people who are buying these to trade are buying 10 of them all at once. You know, they're buying 2, usually 1 to keep and then 1 to trade. And I think within the unfortunate circumstances that Mattel has created, I do think that that's a reasonable thing to do. Adult doll collectors need to respect kids' dolls. People be talking about them so disrespectfully, or always talking about their sexuality or adult themes, when it's like, calm down, they're just fun characters that inspire kids and the child at heart. And I think the brand should be respected for their content. I'm not sure what other adult themes this person might be talking about, so I'm just going to be focusing on sexuality, because adult themes is like a very broad range, and I don't want to speak on that because I might agree or disagree depending on the actual theme. But I will say that the sexuality, I heavily disagree on. I think it's totally fine for people to headcanon or speculate on a doll's sexuality, or even want a doll to have a canon sexuality, because it's not just adults that are queer. We'll say that, because I frankly don't think that this person is commenting about all the heterosexual dolls. I don't necessarily think that they have a problem with Barbie and Ken, you know? Not to insult the commenter, I'm sorry, but like, in general, when people complain about sexuality, it's not sexuality broadly, it's queerness that they're complaining about. I do get it in the sense that, like, children playing with this probably aren't thinking explicitly sexual thoughts, but they might have, if they are a young girl, a crush on another young girl, or they might be a boy who has a crush on another young boy. You know, sexuality, I don't necessarily like that term in this sense, because, like, I do think sexuality makes people think of sex, and that's not what I'm talking about. But the way that people are romantically inclined is not something that is exclusive towards adults. Like, kids can have crushes on opposite genders, same genders, people who don't have a gender. You know, like, it's something that people who are young experience. There are so many people who are queer who have realized from a young age that they don't align with their gender, or they feel like they have a certain sexuality. And it happens younger than some people expect. Like, funny story, I identify as bisexual or queer, whatever, you know, you want to call it. And in preschool, my first crush, not a serious crush, I didn't even, like, really register kissing at that point, so I wasn't even like, I want to kiss, but I was assigned female at birth, so I was a young girl, and I had a crush on another girl in my classroom, just in the sense that I thought she was really pretty and I wanted to be friends with her. And I was in preschool. I had no concept of sexuality at that point, but I was feeling that, you know? And again, it wasn't weird. It wasn't actually sexual, but it was just like an innocent little crush, my first little crush. And it was on a girl. It just happened to be on a girl. And I've had crushes on boys before. So, like, it's something that people realize very early on in their life in some cases. Not always. Some people realize later. But sexuality is not inherently an adult theme. It's just part of life, and I don't think that it's wrong for dolls to represent underrepresented sexualities so that kids can feel like, hey, it's okay if I feel like gender is weird and Frankie makes me feel seen, or hey, it's okay if I'm a girl and I like girls or non-binary people and I'm sapphic like Cleo. You know, like, it's okay to feel those things, and I don't think it's wrong for doll companies to represent those things. I'm like getting tired. I feel like I've said so many controversial things this video. Anyway, though, a lot of Playline collectors act like BJD collectors must be super rich to be able to afford BJDs, but spend the same amount of money on buying Playline dolls. It's a perfectly valid choice. I love both BJDs and Playline. It just ticks me off when people say that they could never afford BJDs, like the rich BJD collectors, but spend hundreds per year on Playline. BJD collectors don't buy dolls at the same rate. Playline collectors buy Playline. We most get like one doll every year or two. We're spending the same amount of money. I do get that, like, on paper this is correct, but I think that it is kind of a mindset thing, and I understand it because that is how I feel. Like, I definitely spend enough money per year on Playline dolls to buy a BJD, but I don't, because it's the difference between one lump sum and a bunch of little sums. It's kind of like the idea of like, oh, well, if you give up coffee, you can afford to buy a house. That's definitely different, because the housing market in America is ridiculous right now, and it is not connected to coffee. But just as an example, yes, if I didn't buy a coffee, I don't, but if I didn't buy a coffee at Starbucks every day, I could have more money in the bank. But it's a lot easier to spend with the coffee, like $5 to $10, than it is to save up and end up having enough for a down payment. So with dolls, it's a lot easier for me to spend $25 once or twice a month than it is for me to save that $25 once or twice a month and end up once a year buying something. Especially because for me personally, I can justify for myself little expenses like that. Like I can say, okay, yeah, it's okay for me to buy something that's $25 because we have that in the bank. It's financially responsible. And I can even sometimes get up to a collector level where it's like, okay, 100 is a lot, but we do have this. It's okay for me to spend this, and I can do that. But some BJD dolls are really expensive, and even ones that are less expensive, you know, like the price tends to be on the higher side. And so for me, it's really hard for me to justify spending like $300 on a BJD doll, because even if I've saved that money up, my head immediately goes to, okay, well, you've saved this money up. You could buy a BJD, but you could also do this with the money that is like more responsible. And even if I've saved it specifically for a BJD, that's how I will feel. And I will feel like I should be spending it on something else instead. So I think it's more like a mental thing, because yes, ultimately the math might work out to be the same price whether you're buying several Playline dolls per year or one BJD doll per year. But I do think, mentally speaking, for a lot of people, it's easier to buy multiple small purchases per year rather than one really big one. And unexpectedly, that was it. I didn't do like, oh, hey, last one. I didn't realize that was it, but that's all we have today, except I have to share with you my controversial opinion. So I did basically touch on the first one, because I said I have two, earlier, somewhere in this video, where I mentioned that I do think people will switch up their opinions, and a lot of people, it's genuine, but some people are just kind of switching up their opinions with the tide of what is popular, and it really bothers me. So I did mention that one already, but my other controversial doll opinion has to do with canon, and specifically in this instance with Monster High and with Garrett Sander. And I feel like this is going to be really unpopular, but it's my opinion, so here we go. So over the years, Garrett Sander has said a lot of things in regards to the canon of Monster High, specifically when it comes to queer representation within Gen 1 of Monster High. I think most recently he confirmed that Venus and Rebecca were meant to be implied to be into each other, and I just have feelings about it. I'm going to be 100% honest. I understand where people are coming from, and I understand wanting these things to be canon, and I'm not saying that they shouldn't be, in the sense that I do believe in all representation, and I especially believe in this case in queer representation. I think that's a wonderful thing, and I think it's perfectly fine for people to have headcanons. I have so many headcanons for so many different franchises, and I think that's fine and normal and wonderful, and I think it's also normal to want your headcanon to be canon, especially if there hasn't been anything explicitly said. So like, if Cleo and Deuce are canon in Gen 1, you probably aren't hoping, or like expecting, I guess I should say, Deuce and Rochelle to be canon in Gen 1, because that wouldn't really make sense. But since Venus and Rochelle, at least to my knowledge, didn't have any romantic partners in Gen 1, I think it's normal, if you have the headcanon of them being interested in each other, to want that to be canon, because it's actually like a possibility. But I'm sorry, I know this is unpopular. Just because Garrett Sander created Monster High, I don't think that years down the line, when he is no longer connected to the brand, he can just decide that things are canon when they weren't. I know that sounds so bad, but to me it's not really any different than J.K. Rowling tweeting out canons about Harry Potter and about how Dumbledore was gay the whole time. I understand he's probably coming at it from a much better place than J.K. Rowling. Like, please don't get me wrong. I think he's probably a much better person than J.K. Rowling. But it's so far removed, and I guess what really bothers me is that Gen 1 is over. Like, the show is over. Garrett Sander probably did want a bunch more representation than Mattel would let him get away with, but Mattel didn't let him do it, and it's over. And so instead of trying to retroactively make things canon in Gen 1 and force that representation in Gen 1 when Mattel wouldn't allow it to happen, I think it's better to focus on the generation that we do have and the representation that we do have or might get to see in the future because it's still ongoing. Like, I guess I think it's not productive to try to retroactively fix via like a question at a convention the representation issue in Gen 1 instead of acknowledging that, yeah, there wasn't queer representation in G1 of Monster High because Mattel wouldn't allow it. And it sucks and it's sad and I'm not happy about it. I would rather have it had been the case that Rebecca and Venus were together, even though I don't particularly ship them. I would have appreciated that more because it would have been some sort of representation. But I think retroactively making it canon through Garrett Sander, yes, he's the creator, but he doesn't work with Monster High anymore. I think that that is almost harmful in the sense that I think it makes people retroactively decide that G1 was more representative than it was, when the reality is that they would not let any characters explicitly be gay. And I think that we have to acknowledge that was a problem in Gen 1 instead of trying to say, oh, well, the creator said this a decade later. You know, like, it doesn't sit right with me, and I know that's probably unpopular because I think that people want it to be true, and I understand wanting that. But I just think it's kind of a dangerous headspace to get in because I think it leads to people thinking that the show and the franchise was better and giving it more credit than it deserved. But yes, that is actually it. We rounded out the video with my own unpopular opinion here. This was a hard one to film. Like I said, I think so. It's been so long. I've been filming for so long. I tend to be more of a peacemaker. I like to just let people have their opinions and let people exist as long as they're not harming others. But also, sometimes I have my own opinions, and a lot of the time I don't want to share them because I'm a people pleaser and I want people to like me, but like, some things need to be said and sometimes I have to have my opinions, so I've had my opinions today. Anything I said, I really hope I didn't offend anyone, but if I did, I promise that's not my intention. I just have my feelings, and like I said earlier, you guys are absolutely allowed to talk about your own thoughts on everything we discussed here in the comments. Just please do try to keep it nice. I'll be monitoring them as closely as I can to try to keep everything nice and happy because I'm good with discourse, but I'm not good with being rude to people in the comments, so try to keep it nice if you disagreed with me or anyone else there. But yes, I hope regardless of your thoughts, you're able to at least enjoy the video today. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day or your night or whatever it might be, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye, guys!